Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, now streaming only on Netflix.
We're here to entertain you. We'll sing your songs for good times, the best times. You can't go wrong. We'll two-step, a new step. It won't be long when the Dixielanders are playing. Soon you'll be swaying, so come on, sing along.
Hi, hello, and welcome to another episode of Before My Time. I am your host, Gelsey Laurie, and we are joined, as always, by our wonderful, beautiful friend and producer, Matt Kelly, to talk about David Bowie.
TIAA is on a mission. Why? Because 54% of Black Americans don't have enough savings to retire. So in collaboration with big-name artists like Wyclef Jean, TIAA released Paper Right. New music inspiring a new financial future. With 100% of streaming sales going to a nonprofit that teaches students how to invest. Stream Paper Right now and help close the gap.
If you like music and you like podcasts and you like to laugh and you like to learn, you need to immediately subscribe to One Hit Thunder. Each week on the One Hit Thunder podcast, we dive deep into the story and back catalog of a one-hit wonder band or artist. From there, we have a good, healthy discussion as to whether they brought the one-hit thunder or were nothing more than a one-hit wonder. We have a huge back catalog, and we've done episodes on everything from Don't Worry, Be Happy and the Macarena to King of Wishful Thinking and Cumbersome. I promise you're going to love the show more than Jaquan loved getting tipsy, and even more than Bobby Boris Pickett loved making alternate versions of the Monster Mash. Subscribe to One Hit Thunder wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, Gelsey, 50 years ago in June, we missed it back in June, but we're getting to it now. The rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars turned 50 years old.
That's crazy.
And you know, you and I are some Jim Henson loving folks, so I'm sure that both of us have a similar. I know that Labyrinth was definitely my introduction to David Bowie as a child, but being a fan of music and theatrics, I mean, you don't get anyone better from that time period than good old David Bowie. Part of us were thinking about, do we just talk about this album? But I think this is a good excuse as any to just talk about our love of David Bowie, sort of how we did with the Elvis episode last month. So I'm going to make the assumption, rightfully so, that you are the bigger David Bowie fan than I am. As much as I love David Bowie, you tend to love that era of music on a much deeper level than I do.
I went through a big David Bowie phase in high school. I went through like every big phase in high school, I guess. But yeah, no, I do love. I hadn't listened to David Bowie in like a minute just because it happens, because your music goes on a roll. And I have been listening to him to prep for this. I was like, oh, I'm going to put Bowie on. And I'm like, God, I've missed. Like, I think I just re-kicked up a David Bowie phase. I was like, I forgot how much I absolutely love his music.
His stuff is so unique and interesting. Like for me, my first introduction beyond Labyrinth to David Bowie was actually at a very low point in his career, performer-wise, was when he put out Earthling, which I love that album from 1997, but it was his attempt at doing like industrial music, and it was produced by Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, and it had two minor hits on it. It had Little Wonder and I'm Afraid of Americans.
I like I'm Afraid of Americans.
I love that song. But I remember hearing stories that at that time he was the opening act for Nine Inch Nails and was getting booed off the stage because the audience had no clue who he was or about his legacy. And he was trying to only perform songs off of that album at that time. And it was just not a great Bowie period. But I remember I was like, this guy seems really interesting. And then it was years later riding with my parents, listening to classic rock stations. And I can tell you the song that first made me love him was Space Oddity.
It's so good.
The second I heard that song, I was like, this guy is unbelievable.
Do you know how many times in my week, and I didn't realize it, I break out when someone's like trying to like get a hold of me, or I'm like, hey, listen to me. And I'm like, this is Major Tom to ground control. And everyone's like, what? And I'm like, thank you. I just realized that the other day. I was like, I do that a lot.
I used to do this really, I've talked about it before. I would form these weird cover bands and we would do these really abstract, strange covers. And I had this idea for Space Oddity in my brain because I had a megaphone at that time. And I literally wanted
it's like, why?
Yeah, of course I did. And I wanted to do Space Oddity where it was like almost freeform jazz. Like the band is just playing whatever the hell they want. And we would do the verses almost as like a spoken word play of the conversation. And then it would like in this noise and chaos, it would build to the chorus that everybody knows. This is Major Tom to ground. But I thought like, oh man, like doing that dialogue through the megaphone and like, I just was like, oh, this would be such a cool spectacle. But it is such an incredible song. And is that off his first? It's like his first or second album. It's
David Bowie 1969. I believe that was his first album.
Yeah, like
just called David Bowie. Yeah, like what a song to just be like, bam, this is who I am. And he was, if you watch, I was watching videos of him perform and like some of like Space Oddity, this, that, he is so young. Yeah, he has such a like beautiful angelic face with an incredible bone structure. No, I don't have to say that twice, but he really just like, I mean, come on, his bone structure is stunning. And it's like perfect. He's like the perfect package of like, of course, that is everything David Bowie has to be. Such a cool, and it wasn't actually until I know like Ziggy Stardust was his first. He had already done in Hunky Dory. What was his alter ego in Hunky Dory?
Let me see.
He kind of had one, but not as much as like, it was after that one that he went into Ziggy Stardust. And that was like his first big, that's where we get the kind of David Bowie that comes to mind, I think, for most people.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything specifically as I'm scrolling.
I thought they said that he had like a little bit, but yeah, Hunky Dory was 1971, and basically he wrote a lot of the songs for Ziggy Stardust during that time, and they recorded them back to back. So he recorded that, and then like immediately in Trident Studios in London recorded Ziggy Stardust.
Hunky Dory obviously has a lot of, if Space Oddity was kind of the first big single for him, I feel like Hunky Dory is the album that really establishes that like, oh, this is a voice that is here to stay a little bit, because you get, obviously the song Changes is still a massively popular song, but you get Life on Mars is on there, Queen Bitch is on there, and this is the other part where I have to admit a lot of these songs even I didn't discover until Life Aquatic of Steve Zissou, that has that brilliant...
Oh my gosh, that is such a good soundtrack where he sings them all in Portuguese, like acoustic Portuguese Bowie. Yeah. I was like, I didn't know that I needed this in my life. Holy shit. I haven't listened to that soundtrack in a long time, but there was a phase that, I listened to it so much.
That introduced me to a ton of these, like, not to say that they weren't hits, but like much minor hits in comparison to like the songs. When you think of like David Bowie, you're thinking of Ziggy Stardust and Suffrage City and Changes and Space Oddity. So like stuff like Life on Mars and Queen Bitch kind of gets like buried in the pile of just nonstop massive hits that he had.
Yeah, it goes there. And then actually I wanted to go back to his first album, David Bowie.
So he had two albums named David Bowie. That's where the confusion is. So Space Oddity was on the second David Bowie, but the first David Bowie didn't really make too many waves. So they were released like months apart from each other because it was the 60s and you were putting out a new album every like 6 months.
Unlike... Yeah, we always go off on that. Like the amount of content that some of these bands are pumping out within such a short time. It's like, what the? Well, I know, like, speaking of the 60s, since Ziggy Stardust got born, 1971, he started creating it, and it got released specifically June 16th, 1972. And he wanted to kind of get away from the 60s hippie denim thing that was going on. And glam rock was starting to be born, and David Bowie is the epitome of glam rock, but he stole a lot of he's super inspired by Iggy Pop. He was coming out with kind of the same, they were very compared for so many reasons and are similar in ways of this kind of feminine glam rock.
I was going to say it felt like the only big difference is that somehow Iggy Pop got so much punk credentials.
Yes, I was going to say Iggy really went punk, and David Bowie always stayed. I feel like he just always stayed glam rock.
Yeah, he was just so theatrical. Whereas Iggy Pop, I think that's the big difference. Is as much as I love David Bowie, I couldn't see David Bowie being able to perform in some of the dingy shitholes that Iggy Pop was made to perform in.
David Bowie needs some sequins, big theatrical lighting, and
Iggy Pop doesn't even need a t-shirt.
Does not need a t-shirt. He just needs small leather tight pants, a little bit of a wet hairdo, and we are golden. There's Iggy.
And 9 times out of 10, maybe some blood.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, no, I do like Iggy Pop. I like some of his songs, but I'm not near as into Iggy Pop as I am David Bowie. But I know that David Bowie really found a lot of inspiration as well from Lou Reed. He liked him a lot. And they all kind of were out at the same time. Lou Reed was a little earlier, but I love Lou Reed. I do. Take a Walk on the Wild Side is one of my all-time favorite songs.
That whole album is worth dissecting just that album one day would be worth it.
It's so good. Yeah, we should do that. But yeah, Ziggy, he created this alter ego, Ziggy Stardust, which it's interesting. I was watching this interview and David Bowie had said he started to just be Ziggy Stardust, this character he created off stage as well. And anytime press was around, anytime cameras, he would always just be Ziggy. And he started to do it in his personal life, and he started to lose who he was. He was I don't know who David Bowie is anymore. And he started questioning his own sanity. He had a lot of I think mental disorders within his family. I forget if his mom or dad or someone had schizophrenia, this, that. So he kind of already had a lot of that going on. And I think there was a phase where it shook him. And that's where he didn't want to be defined by Ziggy forever. And that's when he created Aladdin Sane. Aladdin Sane is who I for a long time thought Ziggy Stardust was the lightning bolt across the face. But that's not. That's his alter ego, Aladdin Sane, which it's spelt like Aladdin and the Magic Lamp, Aladdin, but it's a lad insane. And I was I love this.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah,
isn't that great? You didn't? I know.
When I think of Ziggy Stardust, I always think of comparatively, I think of Zool in Ghostbusters. I think
totally. Oh my god, yes, that is that is Ziggy. And I mean, actually, Ziggy Stardust, the whole concept is, if I may, it is described as a loose concept album and rock opera. Ziggy Stardust concerns Bowie's titular alter ego, Ziggy Stardust, a fictional androgynous. I was saying Adronimus Rex, the new dinosaur endogenous or whatever.
I think you were thinking of an android.
I don't know. Fuck that. And bisexual rock star who is sent to Earth as a savior before an impending apocalyptic disaster. In its story, Ziggy wins the hearts of fans, but suffers from a fall from grace after succumbing to his own ego. And then I think eventually in the story, the quote-unquote story, fans kill him. So it's just a super spectacle kind of all over idea. And I love that kind of alien creature rock star that he created. And his band members were, the Spiders were Mick Ronson, Trevor Bolder, and Mick Woodmansey. Again, there will be a pop quiz at the end of this, so take those names down, kids. But I thought it was cool. One of his producer, at least for Ziggy Stardust, Bowie co-produced it himself, and then Ken Scott was his producer, and he was one of the 5 main engineers that worked on all the Beatles albums. He worked engineering Elton John, Pink Floyd, Duran Duran. So Ken Scott, little applaud for you. You know your shit.
Well, and that's God, now I'm thinking of, there's a movie that I don't think you've seen. I think we've talked about this, and you have not seen Phantom of the Paradise, correct?
I have not.
Okay, so we'll do an episode of that eventually. I want that to be a Matt and Gelsey hang out in real life, and I make you watch that movie with me. But that film came out in I want to say 1973, 1974, and there is a character who is very much inspired by like a David Bowie mixed with an Iggy Pop. It's that combination of like glam and punk rock into a singular character. But the premise of the musical that he's supposed to be singing in feels very similar to the plot line of Ziggy Stardust. So I'm confident that Ziggy Stardust was a huge influence on the writing of it, which was written, all the music was written by Paul Williams, who did all the songs for the Muppets and wrote some songs for the Carpenters. And, you know, he was a great songwriter as well. While we're talking about the album, Ziggy Stardust, though,
I definitely want to talk about some of these songs.
We have to talk about what I think is one of the catchiest choruses. Suffragan City, baby.
Oh my God. I literally had that song on repeat in my car the other day.
That
wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Oh, it's so good. I was like, there was a day I had that song on repeat. I was driving to work and I was drinking my energy drink, like rallying up for work. And I know for sure I had about like, I'm going to say 3, but probably 5 people have full on like look over and they're just like, this chick is crazy. I was jamming in my car and the song would end and I was like, again, and like turn
don't
it like,
lean on me, man, if you don't want a ticket.
no, down a Suffragan City.
Like, oh my God, that
so
is
fucking good.
It's a good,
and it's
just
right
screaming.
after. I mean, oh, it's so good. And obviously the song like Ziggy Stardust is amazing. Just that first, like, you know, you're just like, yes. And of course it's a great, and I love the where were the spiders, but to follow that in as far as sequential order on the album, to do that and then follow it with Suffragette City into Rock and Roll Suicide, it's perfect. I love Rock and Roll Suicide too. I found that in high school, that song, because it's like, you know, not as well known of a track necessarily. I love that one. I did want to point out, this is a random Lady Stardust. Do you know Lady Stardust?
Yeah.
The piano sounds so much like West Side Story to me. It sounds like, Maria, I just met a girl named Maria. And it's, every time I listen to it, I trip the fuck out. It's just like, there's like one part of the piano chord progression that I'm like, it's West Side Story. And so, I always have to let people know when I hear a different song in a song. My sister and I like will call each other and be like, listen to this song. It's actually this song, or kind of a thing. Like, you know what other song on this album that is a fucking bop is Star, which used to be Rock Star, but then just changed to Star. Oh my God. I literally this morning listened to that song. I was on the way to my bank and I was like, I'm going to put this on. And again, I was just having a full, like, one of these days I'm going to rip out my steering wheel from my car accidentally, how hard I'm holding it and like shaking it and rocking. Cause I'm just like, it's so good. I'm like that girl in Finding Nemo that's like, did she wake up? But like that energy towards music. I'm like, anyways.
You know, it's crazy to think about though, if you're correct, and that he got so lost. But if he got so lost in the Ziggy Stardust character that he needed to create a new one, you'd think that it was a lot longer until Aladdin Sane, but it's the next album. So he must have gotten so lost in that character so early. Like, that's crazy.
And he also didn't want to get like stuck in it, I think, for his personal sanity, but also then have to forever have that be your career. You know, once you paint your face like Kiss, I hope you like painting your face like that, because that's what you're doing for the rest of your career.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
But I love the cover art for Aladdin Sane is probably the most famous David Bowie cover art. You know, it's the dark shadow. It's him looking down with the lightning bolt painted on his face. I mean, that's on every t-shirt. It's, if you really like open it and zoom in on the actual art, it's stunning. He's, again, the bone structure on this man, but it's angelic. There's just this almost like boyhood. He still has such childlike, angelic features, but it is this man that is this like, you're still coming out of Ziggy Stardust. You still kind of have this alien mind. It's beautiful.
Well, and it's worth saying that like that's not just the most iconic album cover for David Bowie, but it's arguably one of the all-time most iconic album covers. Like, that is a very, there are people who I am sure do not know David Bowie that well, but know that album cover. Like,
absolutely.
Can pinpoint it and say, oh, I know that.
And it's funny, I actually can say I don't know as many songs on this album.
No,
And
that was what kind of shocked me. As much as I know that album, when I looked at the track
oh,
list, I was like, I actually don't
yeah,
know
I
if
don't.
I
I
know any of
forgot.
these.
I did read this though, that Aladdin Sane also kind of like was developed. It was like an idea of this was for his US tour, and that's why they were so close together. Was Ziggy Stardust was predominantly in the UK, and so it was during his American tour. He wanted like a harder edge, flashier version of Ziggy Stardust, and it was. I read one thing that it was like almost like this is what happens when Ziggy goes to the US. Is this
Gotcha.
character was born?
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know as many of these songs. I thought for sure I was going to open it and be like, "Oh my god, every song." And they do cover he covers the Rolling Stones Let's Spend the Night Together, which was one of my favorite songs to start with. The Stones. I love that song.
Well, and then he followed it up.
Genie.
He followed it up
Mhm.
with Pinups, which I also think was not very well received, didn't have a ton of hits, but that was A-okay because the next year he drops Diamond Dogs and we get Rebel Rebel,
Oh,
which is just like an undeniable hit. Like,
Diamond Dogs. Just I don't know anything on pinups. Diamond Dogs talk about also like the cover art with him leaning over nude and the coloring. He like looks like a creature, and he's
yeah.
so thin and who are these chicks behind him? The Diamond
Yeah,
Dogs.
that's very much where you do see that Iggy Pop influences, that they both had the exact same body
Mhm.
structure of just like skeletal.
Yes, yes. Yeah, very thin. And oh my God, yeah, Rebel Rebel's great, but I love the song Diamond Dogs. And I actually think I was introduced to this song through the Moulin Rouge soundtrack.
I
Um,
think that
be-
makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, that version of it. And I was like, oh, this is a great song. And then when I realized it was a Bowie song, when I got a little more, because Moulin Rouge, yeah, I was 10 years old when that came out. So I was still
Yeah.
quite young. And
Look,
that,
we don't shame people around here. I know that the internet has been really shaming kids for discovering 30 to 40-year-old songs through Stranger Things, but like
but
we
that's
have
the
all
beauty of
learned,
it.
yeah, we've all learned stuff from movies and TV shows years
That's
after they were popular. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what I love when shows do that. Or we like our B-52s episode. You asked if I had a problem with Family Guy doing Rock Lobster, and like if that's how everyone knows Rock Lobster. A lot of people, do I have a problem with that? I'm like, no, it's now they know it. If it wasn't for that, they wouldn't know it maybe. So I love finding things through other things and being like, oh, even Heroes, which will go. It's one of my favorite songs, but I knew that song first from Moulin Rouge from the Elephant Love medley.
And
But
I think I hate to admit that I think I first knew Heroes because of the Wallflowers cover of it on the Godzilla soundtrack. I don't think I realized it was even a cover until a couple years later, when, again, so much of my David Bowie exposure was a combination of the songs that were in Life Aquatic and like being a
Mhm.
kid in the backseat of my parents' car when they would listen to classic rock radio. Like, so I would hear
Mhm.
like bits and pieces of songs, and like, certain ones, like I knew Meatloaf. I loved Meatloaf. My dad would
Love
put on the
Meatloaf.
Bat in the Hell cassette tape
Bat Out
all
of
the
Hell
time.
was what I grew up with.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love that album so much.
But like a lot of those other artists, like even the Beatles, until I started going through my dad's Beatles records and actually listening to them, I knew a bunch of the songs, but I didn't know that it was the Beatles because I was just in the backseat of a car listening to music as a kid and not really connecting
Mhm.
the part of my brain that started to connect the pieces of like, oh, like these songs are by bands and these bands have a specific sound and sometimes their sound changes over the, like, that's a lot for an 8-year-old to process. They're just like, I like this song, it's fun to sing along with, it's fun to
Mhm.
stomp my feet to or whatever, like. But yeah, I don't know, that's a little bit of a tangent, but that shit's been driving me nuts for the last year, is like people getting all up in arms with like, these kids
No,
learn
I think
about
that's
Kate Bush and Metallica through
I
Stranger
think
Things.
that's
It's like,
dumb. At least they're out there, and at least people are still using
yeah,
this amazing music.
yeah,
And
the other
yeah,
option is that they don't know those things at all, like.
exactly. That's what I was saying. That's my point. Yeah, it's whatever. But anyways, Diamond Dogs, that version, obviously the original, like it is such that guitar when it starts, like that's one of those songs that can get me a little hot and bothered. Just that down, down, and you can almost feel the energy of like him being live on stage doing it.
Yeah.
You can feel it through any speaker. I'm like, this is amazing. Like, wow, yeah, it really does. Next up, he went to Young Americans, which that's another one I know that's a great song. But Fame is on there, which that is a fucking great song.
I just think Young Americans might be the most chill song that David Bowie's like. That's like I hear that song and I think of Margaritaville. You know what I mean? Like you're just like lounging out, just like a nice saxophone.
Yeah, it is kind of that. Even the album cover is him, with that beautiful glam light behind him, just sitting with a cigarette, kind of like hunched over it, as if he could be leaning over a piano. But that's released 1975. I know. God, what
we do have to talk about Fame. Fame, that song.
I love Fame.
That is a good ass song. And it's got such a funky little like groove to it. Like that's the other thing, I guess. As much as we know David Bowie as like Mr. Glam Rock, the amount of genres that he not only dabbled in but did well is unbelievable. It's almost untouchable by almost any other artist. Like even some of the best artists that we can think of really stayed within their musical lane most of the time, but he really played with every genre that he could get his hands on.
Well, speaking of like different genres and stuff, but like alter egos, he had multiple personas, and so I felt like that's like kind of each persona had their own style. Like we talked about Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin Sane. I think it was the first one I was talking about is Major Tom.
Okay,
was his, if you will, like persona. But he had at least 5. Yeah, there's Aladdin Sane, Halloween Jack, the Thin White Duke was another one, and that's kind of his more
modern one.
Modern, just wear a suit, which I love. Like he was someone too, as he aged, he still was just like damn straight sexy.
Oh, he was
his
gorgeous,
appearance in I love him in Zoolander, his cameo, and just his entrance and his sleek suit, sleek fucking bone structure. Can't get off that. And that's one of my favorite looks too, is just kind of that simple cut back in a suit, and he aged amazingly. I'm so sad he's gone, but
that's the thing. He was an icon in every way imaginable, right? Like he was like a fashion icon. He wasn't terribly bad in front of a camera. You know what I mean? Like he was charismatic in interviews. He could act. Like he
was a great actor.
Any genre. Like even like, we're going to jump from Young Americans into Station to Station, which the biggest song on that is Golden Years.
Golden Years. I love that one. Is such a cool, like, Golden Years.
Yeah. That's another one where it's like, it's disco-y almost. Like
it is the Run Through the Shadows part too. The Run Through the Shadows. Run. I'm always just like, yes, it is. I want that kind of cool, like, I hate the smell of cigarette smoke, but some songs make me want to be in a room that's just like filled with cigarette smoke with just kind of cool lights going through it. Maybe like this awesome, like just a cool disco 70s chic room. I just want to be on a shag carpet listening to that song, and anyway,
but
I just trailed off that. I was like,
no, that's totally fine. Then we get into an album that I don't think really did well again, because I'm looking at the songs on this and I don't recognize most of the stuff on the album Low. But the most notable thing about it is that he kind of worked on it with Iggy Pop. They went to France and their goal was to sober up, and that's when they kind of collaborated on a bunch of different stuff. Bowie helped with Iggy Pop's debut album, The Idiot. And that's kind of the biggest noteworthy thing, because I'm looking at these songs and again, don't recognize anything, but again, didn't really matter because that same year he puts out Heroes.
Heroes. I was going to say something really quick, and I was like, isn't it shitty when there's an artist that like obviously drugs, sex, and rock and roll, but then they're like, got to get sober, and they sober up and then like release another album, and you're like, wow, the sober stuff sucks. You should go do heroin again, because that's where your good shit came. Like, and it's not like I wouldn't predict like.
Well, that's the joke that I always used to make with the unfortunate reality of like Alanis Morissette, which is like that girl found inner peace and no one wanted to buy another record from her.
Exactly. It's same with like Adele. Angry. We all want to hear her like breakups and this. I got a little over that. I was like, okay, we got it. You're sad. He didn't love you, but like, come on. But yes, Heroes. And Heroes is one of the greatest songs of all times.
It wasn't Jojo Rabbit, but
it is. Oh my gosh. That moment. Well, I love Jojo Rabbit.
Yeah.
I've had some people watch it and they did not feel the same, or they're like, "Oh, it was cute."
Oh
And I
my
was like,
God.
"Cute? That was art." I
Jojo
love that
Rabbit
movie.
moved me to
Art.
tears.
I go to the movies a lot. That's like my date night I do with myself. And I went to this really cool movie theater in Santa Monica that had a big bar and restaurant. So I like sat at the bar, had dinner, had a glass of wine, and then the chairs were like love seats in this theater because they do a lot of interviews there with directors and there's events kind of staged.
Yeah.
But this was, so I was on my like own little mini couch watching this alone, and it was one of like the best dates I took myself out on.
No,
I
I
love
do
that
move.
movie.
I took
When
myself
she
to
starts
a movie to
dancing,
myself. Oh
no,
my God.
I love date night
It's the
movies.
best.
It's the best. It really is. But that moment when she kind of just starts dancing and you're like, you don't really know what song it is, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's right. She said the first thing I'm going to do when I'm free is dance, and then he's dancing with her, and then it's in German, isn't it? Like the German version of Heroes is playing, and I was like, this is the best way you could have ended this movie.
When I was in high school, me and some of my best friends loved the book Perks of Being a Wallflower.
Mm-hmm.
And they eventually did a movie adaptation of it. And there's this scene where they talk about driving through this tunnel that you can take to get into Pittsburgh. And it's like you see nothing. And then all of a sudden you just exit this tunnel and you see all of the city. And it's this like really incredible thing to experience. And in the movie and in the book, they get into the back of a truck. And as someone's driving through the tunnel, they're standing at the top with their arms out, kind of like a Titanic, while Heroes is blasting. And the infamous line, as he said, in that moment, I felt infinite. And that movie and that book and that moment has been playing in my mind a lot. And I was like, I am pretty sure that is soundtrack to the song Heroes. And I mean, that is in so many ways probably. It's not my favorite David Bowie song, but I think it's the most beautiful song he's ever written. I think that there's something about it.
Yeah, it's not my favorite Bowie song, but yeah, it is I think it's one of those, it's weird. I can have some artists where it's not my favorite song of that artist, but it surpasses that smaller genre and then can be one of my favorite songs of all times.
Yeah.
Like I think does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. Cause I think that's how I describe it too. It's not a song that I will put on very often, but it is one of those songs that if it is on, I'm not turning it off until the song reaches its conclusion. Like I need to stay with it.
Going back to what you said about Iggy Pop and David Bowie going together and collaborating and whatnot, I opened up the page for the album Lust for Life that Iggy Pop did in 1977. I had no idea that literally the music composer on nearly every song is Bowie.
Yeah.
And he did Lust for Life, which is
the best Iggy Pop
one of Iggy
song.
Pop's biggest songs. So yay, Bowie. But I had no idea. I used to listen to this album a lot. And he played keyboards, piano, backing vocals on that album. No clue. That's crazy. That's awesome.
Now, I think if I recall correctly, we're about to hit a really tough period for Bowie because his 70s, I mean, this is a man who definitely had a long, successful career, but I think I recall that his transition into the 80s was not a smooth transition.
No, but there's some good albums here. But yeah.
There's some good albums and there's some good songs, but I think we've been on a track record where it's like every year or so he had a big hit. And I think the 80s, it was a little while. Like he did Under Pressure with Queen, but that's a Queen song.
No, but you're like skipping over 1980. He comes out with Scary Monsters.
Okay.
That is that album. Oh my God, this is 1980. No, we get Scary Monsters, which is a great song. Ashes to Ashes. Fashion, one of my favorite David Bowie songs.
I mean, they're good songs, but they did not chart.
Oh my God. Charting, they don't know what the chart doesn't know what it's talking about, Matt. Gelsey knows what she's talking about.
In the States, it didn't chart. But
Fashion is the charts are wrong.
But the same year, I guess, as Scary Monsters, or around the same time as Scary Monsters was out there, he did do Hot Space with Queen. He showed up on Under Pressure.
I love Hot Space.
Just a beautiful song. But then
Under Pressure is great. I mean,
this is where we start to. It took him a little while to find his footing, though, right? He did the Cat People song, which like I know and love because I love cheesy 80s horror. He did I hate to say this, but one of the worst performances of Little Drummer Boy in history with Bing Crosby. I am just not a fan of that particular song, and I'm Mr. Christmas.
Where are we with life? I want to say because here's Cat People. Are you to Oh, I'm on Let's Dance album 1983.
That's what I was saying. But then
It's
we
so
get Let's
good.
Dance.
Oh
And
my god, literally every single one of these songs is like Modern Love is
yeah, Let's
amazing.
Dance is a great record.
Let's Dance is amazing. Put on your red shoes and dance the blues.
So another
China Girl, though. I love China Girl.
I was going to say China Girl might be another one of those early first David Bowie songs for me because of how much I love The Wedding Singer. I had The Wedding Singer soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's a song that, like, when I was listening to The Wedding Singer soundtrack, this was not one of the songs that stood out to me at the time. I just thought it was strictly an okay song. But then over the years, I would get that, but when I'm feeling lonely, like, who's
My
there?
little China girl.
Yeah, like,
says, shut your mouth. It's
Shut
so
your
good.
mouth.
Oh, man. That's a sexy song.
I'm just saying the 80s were a little rough. He would go up and down because this is also when he did Dancing in the Street with Mick Jagger, which is...
And I know that, like, that's another Family Guy one where they're like, and this happened. And I love that they play that entire video. They're like, we're going to play the whole thing. It is one of those awful, painful things to watch, but you also have to love it because you're like, I love both of these men and I don't care what they do. Like, Mick Jagger and David Bowie are both people that could come out and do anything. And you're like, okay, you doing it makes it okay.
I'm actually, one of the things that I'm really shocked by is that a large chunk of his singles in the 80s weren't really off David Bowie albums. So, like, I'm scrolling through here and it's like, it was him doing the song with Queen. It was a song. It was a song on a David Bowie best of album. It was the Cat People soundtrack. It was the Ziggy Stardust movie soundtrack. It was the Falcon and the Snowman soundtrack. Like,
sorry, it was
just a lot of soundtrack stuff.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if that's what your groove was, they're still great songs. So China Girl, Iggy Pop wrote the lyrics for that, and both Bowie and Pop did the music for that.
Oh, you know what? I feel like deep down in my brain, I knew that, and that kind of makes sense as an Iggy Pop song.
Yeah,
like
I didn't know that.
But once you said that, that unlocks something.
You know what I love though? Cat People was, I believe, on the Atomic Blonde soundtrack.
Yes.
And you want to talk about a great dark side of 80s music is the Atomic Blonde. I love that movie, obviously, as an ex-stunt woman and a self-badass promoter. No, I'm a girl who likes to fight. So that movie I was obsessed with. I was just like, this is so good. But the soundtrack to that is so good. And this song fits so well. But I love this song.
Yeah,
we already talked about it, but I'm saying.
And then, obviously, this is where we start to enter at least my time. We're still before your time, but some could argue, no one would argue this, but I'll say it anyway. The greatest song in David Bowie's career, that is, of course, Dance Magic Dance from Labyrinth.
Shut the fuck up. I was like, I'm pretty sure we've already discussed the greatest. Get out of here, Dance Magic Dance.
But that
I
song,
took my baby. It's all the Muppets bouncing around. Dance, magic dance. Yeah.
Oh, it's such a good song, though. It really is. I put that song on at many a Halloween party, and man, does it get a response. But yeah, I mean, there's a whole generation of kids introduced to Bowie and his codpiece through the magic of Jim Henson's Labyrinth. Kind of the last movie Jim Henson really made because it did terribly in the box office, but yeah, that's a good song. As the World Falls Apart is a beautiful little love song in that. I really do adore the Labyrinth soundtrack and the movie Labyrinth in general. But at this point, I was a 2-year-old baby, so there's none of the rest of this is before my time.
Are out. Continuing down his albums, I'm just kind of like scrolling through. I didn't realize how much Iggy Pop and him collaborated like continuously through the years until. I mean, I was in the late 80s on the albums and some of the songs, he's still collaborating with Iggy Pop. So that's really cool that he inspired him in the beginning and then they became friends. And I didn't realize how much they worked together, which makes sense.
Yeah,
I do. And they made some magic together.
I mean, I know we've brought him up a couple times and eventually we will do an episode, but that's very much like, you know, Harry Nilsson getting into music because he loved the Beatles and then him doing a full album with John Lennon. You know what I mean? Like, it's like stuff like that where it's like, you just love to hear that. You love to hear the story of them not just meeting their heroes, but becoming a contemporary with their hero.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it is, I'm glad, Bowie was, yeah, I mean, he's gotten at least I feel like there was that slump, like he said, and he couldn't kind of find his refooting. And then in the mid to late 90s, I feel like he did at least a little come back and because he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1996 and the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2005.
Yeah.
What? He was inducted to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Hall of Fame. I didn't even know that was a thing. And Rolling Stone proclaimed him, Bowie, as the greatest rock star ever. I love that because I 1,000% agree. I mean,
I would agree
is
with
the
that.
epitome of what a rock star is. This glam, pseudo-sexual, feminine, like it's kind of, what Harry Styles is kind of trying to do the Bowie thing a little bit now, I think, with I'm going to wear a dress and heels in that 70s glam way. But it's anyone that's doing stuff now, they're not the first. No one's ever the first, but in the 60s and 70s, even into the early 80s, people were doing things that didn't exist and hadn't been done before. So they are the pioneers. And I feel like Bowie really is a pioneer of a rock star. The glam bands that came after, like Kiss, that wouldn't exist if it wasn't for people like Bowie.
Yeah, no, and yeah, he was probably one of the first rock stars where, like, it's like men wanted to be him, women wanted to be with him. But I think Bowie was the first one where it was like both men and women wanted to be with him. You know what I mean? Like he was just like this undeniable. Again, I keep throwing the phrase androgynous around, but like it was like he defined gender or anything. He was just this larger than life persona. And when he passed away in 2016, that was one of those, that was like when Prince died. You know what I mean? Like it was that you felt that ramifications through everybody. Whereas like you like similar to how I say, like, if I meet someone, they say they don't like Motown music, I'm like immediately suspicious of them. Like if you don't like at least a David Bowie song, like questionable.
Yeah, I agree. There are certain things that it's like we can agree to disagree different, but there are certain things that if people are just like, I don't like that, I'm like, well, I don't like you. Goodbye. And I beep bop boop bop in reverse out of that conversation.
I like that you Brita bought it your way out of there. So
yeah, that's exactly what I do. Yeah. I've thought maybe this is the year I'll do a Aladdin Sane costume for Halloween.
I think you could crush that.
I've always thought about doing it every year. I'm like, is this the David Bowie year? And I'm like, no. I've got like a list of Halloween costumes that I like every year. I'm like, is this Slave Leia year? And then I'm like, nah, I don't want to wear that all night. So there's some things. I want to be the Martian from Mars Attacks. And then that bitch Kardashian, she's not no Kardashian. I think Kendall Jenner, one of them, a few years ago did that. And I was like, that's been on my list for 10 years. You don't get to do that. You don't even like that movie, Kendall.
Hi, listeners. I'm Carolina.
And I'm Tessa. And together we are Femme Regard Podcast.
Femme. We are a show dedicated to educating and entertaining underdeveloped filmmakers and film enthusiasts alike.
We love sharing our experiences as filmmakers, what we've learned and what we've gone through.
And we love bringing on professional industry guests.
We want our listeners to learn from the best and get an honest account of the biz.
So come join the Femme Fam and give us a listen every Friday.
Streaming on all the major podcast platforms, including YouTube and our website, femregard.com, and of course, the Geekscape Network.
All right, Gelsey, let's see. I have a tough one for you.
Oh, fuck. Okay.
You have to make a mixtape for somebody to show them everything about David Bowie in just 3 songs. What 3 songs
Fuck
do you put on this mixtape?
No. Pass. I'd like to. That's a pass. Okay, let's see. I think. Oh, it's like a tie. Do you put Space Oddity? Yes, I'm gonna go to Space Oddity. I wanted to put Ziggy Stardust on there, but I think Space Oddity. Let's do Suffragette City and Heroes.
I shit you not. That was my exact same list.
Shut the fuck up. That's why we're friends and that's why we do a podcast together. It's hard because it's like I want to get that range. I feel like I picked like Space Oddity and Suffragette City, doing them so close in his career. They kind of have that same, but you get that good rock and roll. I think we just both love Suffrage City so much. And
But
then
I think you get
Space Oddity is that weird, bizarre kind of side of him. And then Heroes is just like that beautiful ballad side of him.
Yeah. No, I think that is the correct list.
That is it. So yes.
This is our shortest outro
$1 million.
ever. Where can people tell us what songs we probably should have picked instead of those three? But they'll be wrong because.
I was just gonna say that. I was like, but they're wrong. You can tell us at Instagram. Find us at @BeforeMyTime_podcast. Just DM them or give us a comment on our post. Or you can find us on Facebook. Just search Before My Time. We'll pop up. Sorry, my phone was just starting to play David Bowie, and I was like, "Where's that music coming from?" And let us know there. Let us know maybe a song we didn't mention or something about David Bowie that you know that we failed to say. We appreciate each and every one of you listening every week and supporting us. If you could just throw us a 5-star review, that would be awesome. That way we could get out to more listeners like yourself and spread the joy and laughter, which is the chaos of our conversations. Thanks again. Love you guys. Bye.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.